Choosing a game engine is a tough decision. Most articles on the subject will tend to give vague answers along the lines of, oh, well, it depends on what you're making and what kind of game, is it multiplayer, what's your team like? And yes, while this is all true, if you're just starting out, this is an almost impossible question to answer. You're pretty much forced to learn them all and then just feel in what's right for you. Well, that's exactly what I did. So in this video, I'm going to try to sum up what I learned, what I found difficult, what I found intuitive, and hopefully if you're just starting out and you can't decide whether Unity or Unreal is right for you, I think by the end of this video, you'll have a pretty good idea of what engine is right for you. Unity versus Unreal is a hotly debated topic, similar to the whole Apple versus Microsoft thing. Both engines are capable of producing AAA quality graphics. They come packed with extensive toolboxes such as terrain editor, physics simulation, advanced 3D rendering, VR support, you name it. A while back you used to be able to see instantly which engine a game was made using. Each engine had its own look, so to speak. You could quickly see if it was Unreal or Unity, but that's just not the case anymore. Take this thumbnail of this video, for example. The character on the left was rendered using Unreal Engine and the one on the right was rendered in Unity. And they totally look like they belong in the same scene. There's literally no difference in quality. So does that mean we have a tie? Well, not quite. Let me explain. It's a hotly debated topic. Which one has better graphics? Unity, Unreal, So okay, let's just get this out of the way, okay? So here's the deal. If you want to make a game that is a graphical masterpiece, there is one solution for you, and it is Unreal Engine, okay? Unreal can handle higher particle counts, denser geometry, more lights, more shaders, more complicated shaders. It's just the list goes on and on. Unity cannot beat Unreal Engine in graphics out of a technical standpoint. Now, but the important question is, does this mean that you can't make a visually impressive game in Unity? Of course not. Like, there have been some gorgeous looking games made in Unity. And on the contrary, there have been some pretty ugly games made in Unreal Engine as well. Like, take PUBG, for example. Do you honestly think that that's a good looking game? Because I don't, and that was made in Unreal Engine. So just because you're using Unreal Engine doesn't automatically mean that your game is going to look better. It just means that it has the capability and the possibility of looking slightly better than Unity if you really crank the max out of the GPU. But let's face it, if you're an indie developer and you're just starting out, you're most likely not going to do that. Now, that being said, when you open up the Unity editor and you open up the Unreal editor, everything just looks better in Unreal by default. You have to start tweaking and noodling in Unity to get it looking like Unreal, unfortunately. So they're working on it. Unity is working on it, but that has been the sad truth for a while, and I think that also contributes to giving Unity a bit of a skewed reputation in terms of graphics. But you can definitely get a really nice looking game in Unity, but it is going to be harder. So just keep that in mind. But look, if you're making your first game, graphics really shouldn't be the priority for you. You really shouldn't care about that. Like, it's more about the game, how good it is, and the gameplay. And the graphics, don't worry about it. Like, look at Minecraft, for example. Do I need to say more? Alright, so in terms of learning curve, I started out learning Unity first, and I then moved over to Unreal Engine, and I think that was definitely the right decision for me. Unity is way more scaled back, the interface is simple and easy to understand, it's easy to follow. Unreal Engine, on the other hand, is incredibly complicated, and it has just endless amounts of new windows that you can open up that has endless amounts of features and buttons and knobs and this and that and that and this, and it's just completely packed with stuff that you can do, which obviously is great, but it is incredibly intimidating, especially if you've never opened a 3D graphics application before. If you haven't, then Unreal is going to blow your mind, while Unity is going to feel a little bit more like Photoshop. Not really, but that's sort of how I felt, at least when I first opened them up, that Unity was definitely a lot less intimidating. Unity runs on C#. It was the first programming language that I learned. There's a bit of difficulty in the beginning in learning, and it's a bit confusing, but I found it really easy to get up and running and starting to actually write some code for my own. Unreal, on the other hand, is running on C++, which is driving me insane. I can do basic code in Unreal Engine for sure, but I still find it to be incredibly frustrating to work with, especially comparing to C#. This is not only due to the C++ being harder, but also due to Unreal's documentation. The documentation for Unreal is becoming very good, especially when it comes to blueprints. Most engine features are covered, and you can usually find all the answers you need in the documentation itself. Unfortunately, this is not true for the C++ part. The documentation is incredibly vague, not giving you any real examples for you to work with, just cryptic programmer language code. I'm not a programmer, I don't speak programmer, I don't understand. So for me, it's just kind of almost useless. And many of Unreal's C++ functions lack documentation entirely. You'll find yourself having to dive into the source code and unravel how certain things work all on your own, which is less than ideal when you're just starting out. So combining the increased difficulty of using C++ with a severely lacking documentation makes coding in Unreal very difficult and frustrating. Unity with their C# on the other hand is easy to understand on its own, and combined with a very thorough documentation with examples and suggestions of what to do makes learning to code in Unity an absolute blast in comparison. Thankfully, the documentation is not the only place where you can learn things. Both engines have a very solid community that is always there to help you when you're in need. Unity's community is slightly larger because it has been popular among indie developers for a longer time, but now with Unreal's latest pricing structure of being free until you make money, it has definitely picked up popularity among indie developers as well. Their community is growing and is definitely catching up to Unity, so you'll have a lot of options for YouTube videos and courses that you can buy online for pretty cheap, and just a lot of people who you can ask in the forums. And both Unity and Unreal are very proactive at releasing new videos on their YouTube channels with learning content, tutorials, new features that usually go along with example projects so that you can open the games up yourself and have a look around, which is incredibly helpful when you're learning. If you're a little bit intimidating, I would definitely say start with Unity, start slow, and then move over to Unreal when you feel more comfortable. Now, before I dive into talking about the different tools in Unreal and Unity, I just want to talk briefly about the way the engines are structured and how you will be interacting and working with them. This might not make a total sense to you right now, but just hear me out. So, Unity is a very bare bones type of engine. Like, you're pretty much just left with a program, not really any indication of what to do, how to go about things. You have your tools and your structures, your folders, and you can make code and all that stuff and build levels, but that's about it. Like, after that, you have to make the logic, like, okay, who's your player gonna be? Who's the player controller? How do we read the inputs to put into the controller? Where's the camera gonna be? What's the parent? What's the camera parent to? Like, all these things, it's you have to decide that stuff. You make that up yourself. In Unreal, it's slightly different. Unreal is built with the expectation that you are going to make games that they expect you to make. So, for example, if you're making a first-person shooter game, Unreal Engine is going to be your bread and butter, because obviously it was designed in the first place to make Unreal Tournament. Now they're making Fortnite with it. Unreal Engine has everything built in to be compatible with making an FPS. So you'll have character controllers, you'll have a weapon system, you'll have damage systems, you'll have aim systems, you have presets for throwing grenades, and all this stuff is already there built in for you. And that sounds great, and it is. However, if you want to make a game that is slightly unconventional, you might run into issues with that, because you'll notice that Unreal wants you to do things in a certain way, and if you want to do them differently, it gets a little trickier. And if you are a master programmer or you're really educated on Unreal Engine, this is not going to be a problem for you. But I just want to put that out there, that if you have a desire to just experiment with stuff and do weird things, then Unreal is going to be a little bit tougher in terms of that. However, working with Unreal is really teaching me different ways of structuring game mechanics and levels and where to do things and where to put scripts and where to put functions and all this stuff, because it is very suggestive of where things should be, and that's a great learning experience. Unity, it's sort of like, here you go, do what you want. Okay, so now we're going to go into the tools of, which really is, what is the engine going to do for you? What is it going to offer you? This is where I find the biggest difference between Unreal and Unity is. Simply put, Unreal Engine has it all. It just has all the tools you want. It has a fantastic terrain editor. It has a super advanced animation system where you have a ragdoll set up automatically. Everything is just working. It has full volumetric fog, like I can go on and on, but basically what I'm saying is that if you want something or a function, like it's gonna be there in Unreal. Now, comparing this to Unity is a great engine and fantastic games have been made using it, but I gotta say, there aren't that many tools in Unity. And the ones that are there are just, they don't really work that well, to be honest. Like, they're there, there's a terrain editor, but it's incredibly limited. I found myself having to reinvent a lot of tools to get them to work the way I wanted them to. The guys over at Unity are working really hard at keeping up with Unreal and are releasing new tools that improve the engine a lot. But unfortunately, I get the impression that these new features are a little hacked on and a bit of an afterthought. Unity is releasing new features on a regular basis, but they usually take a very long time to actually make their way into the engine. These new tools are usually offered as separate downloads and are stuck in beta for a very long time. You encounter a lot of error messages and everything just feels a little clunky to me. Compare this to Unreal, which has all of its features neatly implemented into the engine, everything is cohesive and nothing feels out of place. It's all there and you rarely need to take any extra steps to access them. Both Unity and Unreal have an asset store where you can buy community created assets. This is an incredibly good addition and a fantastic way to bridge any gaps the native engine might have. Unreal's marketplace is not nearly as stocked as Unity's, and Unreal's store tends to be a little more expensive than Unity's, so Unity has the upper hand here. Unfortunately though, I feel like Unity is relying a little bit too much on their community to complete their engine for them. And you will quickly notice that there are some pretty big gaps in Unity when it comes to the toolbox. And right now, the primary solution is to buy third-party assets from the asset store. And they are usually not that cheap. And while this could potentially be a great solution for you, personally, I get a little uncomfortable with the thought of having a bunch of third-party tools running your game. Not only do you rely on support from the Unity team, but you also rely on the support of these third-party developers to have your back in case something goes horribly wrong with your game. And I don't know. You have a very bare bones program with very few features, and those features aren't actually that great, versus Unreal, which has tons of features and they all work pretty damn well. I don't know, I feel like Unity is struggling with keeping up. Epic Games are making a killing of Fortnite, and Fortnite is running on the Unreal Engine, so any feature that they design for Fortnite, we get as well. So you can sort of see how they just, it's not really fair to Unity because they just can't keep up with that, and I understand that. So, you know, but that is probably the explanation for why we're seeing so many delays with Unity and why Unreal is really snappy, because they have like updates all the time with new tools, new features, and it's really cool. But yeah. To end this segment on a high note though, a long missing feature in Unity has finally been added. I am of course talking about the shader graph. Up until recently, shaders had to be written by hand using AGL-SL scripting language if you wanted to make your own shaders for Unity. We now have a full visual shader graph available, which will be very familiar if you've used any 3D application such as Maya or Blender. This is a huge update and puts Unity miles closer to Unreal, as this feature unlocks so much potential in making your game look the way you want it to look. But still, the Unity shader graph doesn't feel quite as tightly integrated with the core engine as with Unreal. It is only supported in specific render pipelines, and if you don't set up your project correctly from the start, it's a bit of a hassle to get it into your project. Unreal's material editor, on the other hand, feels very tightly integrated and will look very familiar to any of the other node-based tools such as the visual scripting graph, animation states, etc. But anyways, that's sort of my experience with the tools in both engines. That, you know, Unreal is way harder to understand, more complicated, like shit everywhere, but it's there at least. And if you take the time to learn it, it's really awesome to have everything in one place. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about code. So this is usually the most commonly asked question when getting into the game. They're like, oh, can I make a game without learning how to code? No, you can't. Oh, but what about visual scripting? Okay, you can do visual scripting. However, visual scripting is still programming. It's game logic. It's like, visual scripting isn't actually that different from programming. The only difference is that in programming you need to learn a few syntaxes and you know, understand a few things, but it's really the same in visual scripting. You need to know what the nodes are and what they do and how to put things together. So to attempt to make games without having any knowledge of programming is, in my opinion, a bad idea. You just will run into issues with it. However, it is possible, and we'll talk about it. And now let's talk about code. If you have no prior experience in coding, I cannot recommend that you start with Unreal and you try to learn C++. I took Ben Tristam's course in Unity, which is amazing, by the way. I got a really good handle on C#, And then I went over to his Unreal course, which teaches CPP or C++. And I still don't get it. It's so complicated and confusing and stupid that I don't know, maybe I'm just an idiot, could be, but for me, okay, so I can actually do a bit of basic C++ in Unreal Engine at this point, and I feel fairly comfortable with it, but I'm still, like, it's so much easier in Unity, and it's very frustrating. So the thought of starting out with C++ in Unreal without having learned C# first is just, there's no way I would do it. So if you don't have any experience, I would just focus on getting a little bit of programming knowledge first, because it's going to help you so much. And then you also have what Unreal calls blueprints, which is Unreal's built-in visual scripting tools, which allows you to build game logic without writing a single line of code. And I've been playing around with it for quite a bit now and trying to learn. And it's actually really cool, but I do find that the experience I have in C++ and C# is really helping me understanding, like, I know what I want to do, I just need to find the right nodes and connect them. And I really like working this way because it's very visual, it's easy and to overlook things. I find that with code, it just kind of piles up and it gets confusing. And that said, I'm very glad I have that basic programming knowledge because it's helping me a lot. So that's the Unreal, which will basically allow you to do anything in blueprints, and you could probably produce a full game just using blueprints, not ever touching a single line of code. However, it is recommended on Unreal's website that certain things like heavy computations, which are running every single frame, that you shouldn't do them in blueprints because it is heavier. You are taking a performance hit, but not a major one. So you'd probably be fine. So does Unity have visual scripting? No, they don't. However, there is a tool in the marketplace, as always, which you can buy. However, they have really good reviews. There's like, it's called Playmaker, and there's also one called Bolt. I actually tried Bolt briefly. It's very similar to Unreal's blueprints, actually. It's very, very similar. It's just a little slower, but I found that if I had to work with that, that would be totally fine. Like, it's definitely an answer to Unreal's blueprint. It's going to cost you around $70, so it's a little expensive, but if you're really intent on using Unity and you want visual scripting, then there's definitely options for you. Like, take David Vallet, my friend who made, he's not actually my friend, but he made that Fox game, The First Tree is called. He made the entire game logic using only Playmaker. Obviously, it's an incredibly simple game, but he still made a game, and from what I hear, he made a lot of money from it, so, it could be a good investment. Next, let's talk a little bit about pricing. That is actually something that many people ignore, but I think it's really important to think about this. So Unity will give you their engine for free, given that you are not making more than $100,000 a year off any product created in Unity. So if you make less than $100,000 a year, you don't need to pay them a dime, and you can use the software as much as you want. The moment you make more than $100,000, they want you to upgrade to their Plus program, which is basically $40 a month. And when you make more than $200,000, you have to pay $150 a month. So I feel like that's a really fair deal, to be honest, and it allows people to experiment and try the engine without paying an upfront fee. It's a very respectable business plan. Some people say it's too expensive, but I don't think it is. Unreal, on the other hand, are a little bit more sneaky. So they will also give you the engine for free, but they will want 5% commission off any game you make. Now that might sound fine. There's a clause to it, actually. So you can make $5,000 every quarter or something like that without having to pay the percentage. But when you cross that, you have to pay them 5% of all your revenue. And that's your revenue. That's your gross. So if you release a game on Steam and you sell it for $10 and then Steam takes 30%, it leaves you with what, $7? Like, they're not going to want 5% off $7. They want it off the full price you're selling for. So it's not what you get, it's what you're selling it for. And if you think about that, it's like, oh, okay, well, that sounds fair. 5%, that's not a lot. That, if Steam takes 30, and what are they giving you? Basically the joy of selling your game. I think 30% from Steam, that's a different topic, but it's complete garbage. Okay, so Unreal is going to charge you 5%, and you may think, okay, that's not too bad. But if you think about it, 5%, if you are aiming to make a living off making games, like what do you want to make per year? You want to make $100,000 a year, all right? Am I right? And all the way up to there, you pay nothing to Unity. But with Unreal, 5% of 100,000 is $5,000. You just paid $5,000 that year for a license. And if you make 200,000, like some game developers actually make quite a lot of money. Let's say you make $1 million. Oh, all of a sudden it's getting a little bit more expensive. So I think that it's worth considering this. Like, if you're serious about making games and you want to make this a career, you should really think about how much money that is actually going to cost you in the end. One thing with Unreal though is that if you release your game on the Epic Store, which actually only takes 12% of your game instead of 30%, which Steam does, the money you make off the Epic Store, you don't have to pay those additional 5%. Like, those 5% will be baked into your 12% commission. So if you're planning on releasing on the Epic Store, the whole engine fee is actually void. It's just those 12%. I think that that is actually a really fair deal. 12% to sell your game, and they're also giving you an engine. I mean, what's Steam giving you for their 30%? Nothing. Epic has gotten a lot of hate for their store, and I don't really understand why, because you're giving more money to the developers and you're giving them an engine to make their games with. I don't really understand what the big deal is. Maybe it's more for gamers though. I'm not sure, but I think it's a pretty good deal, and that's what I'll be doing. Anyways, I don't want to bore you with financial details, but I thought I'd mention that because based on this information, I actually decided to go with Unity. And then I started working in Unity, and I got so mad that I decided, fuck it, I'm just gonna pay their stupid 5% fee and work with Unreal. I just feel like you need to be a very, very strong programmer to actually finish a bigger game in Unity. I mean, maybe not necessarily. Okay, so there's... So for me, I'm interested in making 3D games, and I want them to look nice. I really like Firewatch, which was, by the way, made in Unity. But see, here's the difference. When they made Firewatch, they had a whole team. Like, they had a team which was like dedicated to coding making shaders from scratch and creating all these features to make it look the way it did. But you need a team of programmers. Do you see a team of programmers here? Because I don't. So I find that for now, Unreal Engine is actually really cool. And they just bought Quixel, right? So now you have the entire Megascans library for free that you can put in your game at no additional charge. And they have like 10,000 assets up there. So that's 10,000 assets you can put in your game, saving you so much time in modeling. Like, come on, you just can't ignore that. And they keep innovating. You get the Quixel Mixer program, which you can use the texture. It's pretty basic, but they're making, progress with it. So I just find that you're getting so much for these 5% that in the current climate, I'm gonna say Unreal is definitely my choice. I will still keep an eye on Unity though, because Unity does have a lot of promising features that they're announcing. They keep coming out with these like, oh, we're gonna get better at multiplayer, we're gonna get better at graphics, we're gonna have a better animation system and all this stuff, we're gonna have visual scripting, and maybe in the near future I will choose to maybe give Unity another go. I just find that for me right now, I just didn't find Unity to be usable. I spent way too much time just trying to make things work, and I don't want to spend time that. I want to learn how to make games. I want to make cool games, and that's what I want to do. So right now, Unreal is making that possible, while Unity is making it very difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. So now we're gonna move over and talk about you. What is the best engine for you? Because sure, I've been babbling on for quite a while now about why I thought that Unreal was the best engine for me, but that might not necessarily be the case for you, because I want to make one thing very clear here. If you're making a 2D game, like a side-scroller, go with Unity, period. If you don't want to code too much, buy Playmaker or Bolt, whichever looks more interesting to you. I think Bolt was better. It seemed better, but anyways, if you're making a 2D game, I would definitely go with Unity. First off, the pricing structure, obviously. But second, Unity is actually a really good engine when it comes to 2D games, because generally you'll have pretty simple systems in place. It won't be a bunch of 3D and a bunch of rendering. It's just going to be simple graphics. And Unity actually has better 2D tools than Unreal does. Unreal was never designed to be a 2D game engine. It is there. It's called Paper 2D, but I don't know. I tried it a little bit and I didn't actually find it that intuitive, and it felt actually kind of hacked on. I definitely found that Unity seemed to be more comfortable when working with 2D games. They made Hollow Knight in Unity, one of the best games I've ever played, so clearly, there's no... And I think they used Playmaker. They didn't do too much code. They used Playmaker for a lot of stuff, so this definitely shows the power. But when you go into 3D, it gets a little bit more complicated. So if you're looking to make a 3D game, and especially if you have a design background using 3D applications, I would probably say try out Unreal and see how you feel. You'll feel very familiar. It feels more like Maya or Blender or 3ds Max. The one thing that's not easy to get into is the coding bit, the C++. Okay, so if you're not in a design background, but you are a programmer, then you are probably going to like Unity. I hear a lot of programmers complain about Unreal Engine because of their specific hierarchies and their voodoo macros and whatever. But one thing that I do want to mention, if you are an avid programmer, that Unreal, you will have full source access to the engine. With Unity, you don't. But that being said, I'm going to give an overall advice to anyone getting started in game development. If you're new and you just want to try it out and get into it, do Ben's Unity course and learn a little bit of C#, especially if you have no prior knowledge of programming. He teaches you so many things. So he teaches you the basics of programming, but also how to implement it in games and how to actually make games with the code. And for me, that was such a valuable lesson. Like, it doesn't matter that it's Unity or Unreal, but I really, really urge you to actually take that course and learn a little bit of Unity. And then, yeah, you can try Unreal and maybe do a course in Unreal and see how you feel. But I just, if you have no experience, I really recommend to start with Unity. Even if you know that, okay, Unreal is my choice, sure, download it, it's free, it can't hurt. But if you get really discouraged, because this is what happened to me. The first game engine I downloaded was actually Unreal, and I just got like, whoa, like it was just too much. And then I found this course in Unity, and that is what really settled me in. It's like, oh, okay, hey, maybe I can actually do this. So I can't say it enough. Start with Unity, start simple, start with just like recreating simple games like Flappy Bird. I really, really recommend to start with Unity and then move over to Unreal Engine if you're feeling like, yeah, I want to test it out. I think that's going to be the best decision for most people. Because hear me out, Unreal is awesome. It is so powerful, but it is incredibly frustrating to learn it. I'm still frustrated sometimes because it is so complicated and there's just like stuff everywhere, and then there's a submenu of a submenu of a submenu, and it just never ends, all right? So it's definitely something that you learn it very slowly, and it just like, it might seem like you're not making a lot of progress, but it just takes a lot of time to learn. And that was really frustrating for me. Whereas in Unity, I found that I was doing Ben's tutorials and we were just making games like that. And I think that was really encouraging when I was just starting out, and it just taught me the most basic principles. And I highly recommend starting that way, because I think it really is all about the fundamentals. And the fundamentals, it doesn't matter if you're using Unity or Unreal. It really doesn't matter. Yeah. Tip number 1, start in Unity. Tip number 2, switch to Unreal if you're feeling curious, and test it out and go from there. If you have no experience, at least give Unity a month of your time or something like that. Just get used to it and then switch to Unreal if you really feel intent on it. Because if you want to make a game like Dear Esther or Firewatch or like one of these walking simulators, I would totally go with Unreal Engine. You can do all of that stuff in Blueprints, no lines of codes needed because it's really simple, and you're gonna get a way more pleasing result because you do have better graphics in Unreal Engine by default. That's just the case. So in that case, I would definitely go with Unreal Engine for sure. 2D games, Unity for sure. If you're making like an FPS, especially multiplayer. Multiplayer right now, you have to do Unreal because Unity's multiplayer features are really bad and it gets really laggy and it doesn't really work that well. They're working on it. They're working on this dot system, which is supposed to improve multiplayer. But again, I don't know when they're going to release that, and nobody else knows either. So is it going to be one of these Unity things where we just are stuck in beta forever? I don't know. But currently, that's the climate. If you want to make multiplayer, Unreal is pretty unbeatable. So, and we have Fortnite to thank for that. So if you're one of those people who don't like Fortnite, well, maybe now you have a reason to like it a little bit more. I don't actually play Fortnite. Okay, well, hopefully this video was helpful. If you like this video and want to see more videos like this, then please help me out, subscribe and leave a like. That really helps me out a lot, especially right now, because yeah, it's pretty empty. I'm gonna keep making videos like this, and I'm also gonna show some progress of my own games that I'm making. So if you're interested in that, then you know. But anyways, hopefully this video was helpful for you, and now you have a clear idea of how to move forward and what to do and which engine might be right for you. And yeah. Good luck. I hope you make $1 million.